Welcome to our panel discussion, Making the Most of the New Normal. I'm certain that as we navigated our way through water shortages, unprecedented bushfire damage, smoke inhalation, we never imagined for a moment what awaited on the other side. The quote, "I can't wait for 2019 to be over," was often heard. But 2020 arrived with more of the same and then a world-altering event. To quote the great John Lennon, "Strange days indeed." He also said, "Most unusual mama," but I won't. Challenges have been faced by all. Everyone received a ticket to this event, but for those families engaged in early intervention, additional unique challenges have been posed. To assist in traversing this new terrain and how best to make the most of it, I'm delighted to introduce you to our panel. Now, I've been asked not to do biogs for each panelist, as when I timed the abbreviated version, it ran for just over 6 hours. So suffice to say, this is a panel that looks complexity and theoretical detail in the eye, gives it a bloody nose and sends it to the naughty corner to think about what it's done. Quite simply, the weight of knowledge and lived experience held within this panel should require that it come with an intellectual hernia warning. So consider yourself warned. I recommend a visit to their blogs. So please allow me to introduce your panel. By profession, many of course will identify by their role as parents. Allow me to introduce Karen Dimmick, CEO of the Association for Children with Disability. Going to give us a wave? Hey, hi. Dr. Emma Goodall is an autistic disability researcher, author, and professional, and brackets, life changer. Karen Thurman is senior occupational therapist at Plumtree with over 20 years experience. Mogi Bayaskalan, research analyst and peer worker at Plumtree. Sam Payer, over 20 years experience in the disability sector as advocate, parliamentary advisor, family educator, board member, and consultant. And you can see why I've not been able to do full biogs already. Please welcome our panel. And panel, please consider yourself warmly welcomed. There will be time at the end of the discussion for questions, so please send them through via chat. 2 minutes in and no technical problems just yet, so let's see how we go. So I might just jump into the first question. And what I'll do is I'll probably with each question refer it to 2 of the panelists and then open it up after that, should anyone wish to add something else. Early childhood intervention and many other services have moved online because of COVID-19. As a professional or a family receiving therapy, how are you finding the experience and what changes have you made to the way you work to make it effective under the current conditions? And I might start that first one to you, Karen F, I'll say.
Yes, 2 Karens, isn't it? Thank you, Clayton. Yes, wow, what a whirlwind it's been, hasn't it? So as a professional, I have found it both challenging and exciting. And I related so much to everything that Tim Moore was saying. And over the last week particularly, I've had some conversations with the parents of kids that I work with, and I've really asked them, you know, how has it been for you and what has helped, and to blend that in with the ideas that I've had from my side. And I think what we've both come to is that the relationship has become even more important. It should be just as important, but as always, like pre-COVID, but definitely we have to talk more and more and more. So I think for some families, the switch happened very seamlessly and easily over to online intervention, and for others it didn't. And when it didn't, it was really working out per individual what's working, what's not working, and just asking lots of questions and listening, and then trying something new. And if that worked, fabulous. If it didn't work, ask another question, try something new. It's continual. It's and you know, I totally related to what Tim said, that you know, it's like I learned just as much every session from the children and from the parents. And I love it when a parent says to me, you know what, it's just not working. And I think for me as a professional, my job is really making sure that I have that relationship where someone can say it's not working. You know, that's what I see as is a really important role. And I'm constantly working on that. And I think the other big thing has been for me really to think about, what can I bring to this? So to ask a family, what do you need? You know, and I think Tim reflected that as well. You know, I'm a resource. How can you use me? What knowledge do I have that you would like, and how can we bring that together? So they're kind of my initial thoughts, I guess.
Thank you. Moggy, would you like to approach that from a parent perspective, perhaps?
Yes, thanks Clayton for the introduction. As Clayton introduced, I work at Plumtree as a peer worker, but however today in the panel discussion, I will share my experience as a parent. So the pandemic brought many changes and disruptions to our families' everyday routines, including the way we receive the early childhood intervention supports. As a family, we wanted to make sure the supports continue, especially in the challenging times like this. So we embraced the changes and made it an opportunity to really fine-tune how we are going to receive the early childhood intervention supports, both during the pandemic and beyond the pandemic. So we started with updating our calendars and visual schedules to reflect the new routines that really helped with everyone being calmer and knowing what is expected. Then we had a conversation with each of our therapists to talk about goals we can prioritize during this time. Like for example, we always wanted to work on a goal that is strengthening the muscle tones that are involved with eating and producing speech, but never had the chance to do it before because of other priorities. We decided that this was the best goal for speech therapy to work on, because my son and I were spending a lot of time together at home, and this goal needed consistency and repetitions of exercises our speech pathologist has set up for us. So we have been making a great progress with that goal. And yeah, lastly, we also needed to adjust to how we work with our therapists. But that change happened very smoothly and seamlessly, luckily for our family, because even before COVID, especially since my son started school last year, we have been mostly doing parent-only sessions or parent coaching sessions with our therapists, where I meet with our therapists to plan and brainstorm together a goal, then keep meeting to talk about progresses or to do troubleshooting when necessary. So since the COVID, instead of me meeting with our therapist face-to-face, we are just doing our sessions on the phone or on the Zoom. And that was much easier. And this way of working in partnership with our professionals, it really fits well with how I see the early intervention should be. Me in the driver's seat, bringing along different supports and different people along the journey until the time my son is ready to take over the steering wheel. Yeah, to sum up, everything we have been doing since the COVID started working so well with our family and with our son. And because of the challenges the pandemic has brought us, we are actually thriving this year better than ever before.
Wow, that's fantastic to hear. It's we'll cover that what I'll call the silver lining a little bit later as well, but it's fantastic to be touching on that. What I might now is just slightly broaden with the next question, just broaden it beyond therapy. The question was that the pandemic has also changed many other routines that can affect achieving of goals for people with a disability and their families. What are some things that you're doing differently to get good outcomes? And I might go to you, Emma, for that one.
One of the things that I personally have been doing, and I know a lot of other families, or whether autistic individuals have been doing, is really practically learning about change. So I lived in Christchurch when we had the earthquakes, and I learned firsthand that if you are not familiar and okay with change, that life can be very, very difficult. And so this time I embraced the need to learn about change practically and put that into place. And that grows resilience as well. And part of that for me is about replacing routines with kindness, kindness to self, kindness to others. And I think as parents and professionals, sometimes we forget about kindness to ourselves. Also setting different goals, so goals that are relevant to the current times. And that's led me to be trying out new things. So as South Australia's lockdown eased, one of the things we could do is go to the beach. And I like beaches, but I don't like having sand on my feet. And I decided that I was going to try it. And because the world has shifted so much, you know what? That minor sensory discomfort initially wasn't a problem, because there are other things that were so much more problematic. So in planning to try new things with that resilience, I've grown my world, and I know lots of families have grown their worlds and their worlds of their kids through that planning to try new things by change with kindness. So yeah.
It's so much to take in today, and I just sometimes need to take a moment to take it in. Moggy, I'm wondering if you also had something to touch on, something that you're doing differently that's providing you with good outcomes.
Yeah, the routine is something that is very important in our family's life. In the early days of restriction, we were really worried about how we would cope without our daily park plays, weekly swimming and sport classes, and our normal outings to the shops, etc. My two children, both boys, and are very active, and they love and they need big movements throughout the day. So we went creative. We made our home a little playground. But saying that, it's not something very fancy. We just bought a hammock swing, a rocking chair, gym balls, an office chair that has wheels and also spins. We made crash mats using an old foam mattress, and we even replaced their single beds with a bunk bed that has a ladder. It turned out to be an amazing investment. Even now, things have started to go back to pre-pandemic times a little bit. My children still have access to movements every day, even if it's raining, throughout the day, even before school. And that has been really helping them to keep regulated at home, at school. And even the teachers are seeing greater engagement and longer attention span at school, because my kids, they have a bit of movements they need in the mornings. Yeah, the other thing we changed is how to support the social skills goals at school for my son. It used to be our therapists going to the school and working on the social skills goals. In the beginning of the pandemic, we looked at how we could do this without the therapists going into the school physically. So we came up with the plan that the educators are going to implement that goal at school by creating opportunities for facilitated little playtimes for Tingis and with his friends at school. We provided support to the teacher and the so we created resources that needed for the playtimes. It made a huge positive change. My son, who used to not really thrilled about going to school, now he's excited to go to school. He loves those playtimes, looks forward to them. It not only enabled the support to be continuous and consistent, but also it helped our family to build a strong, true partnership relationship with the educators. We are being on the same page, working on the same goals, and keeping each other updated with the achievements and progresses. So yeah, those things have been working well.
I keep getting the words flexibility and resilience keep coming into my head as people are talking, and how creative we are in finding solutions, as long as we know what we're trying to achieve, really. And that, I guess, comes from the voice of our children. Well, this one's really pertinent for me. I'm really looking forward to answers on this. What is a good way to determine what goals need to change and what goals should stay the same during these times? And I wondered if I might offer that to Sam, and then to you, Karen.
Thank you, Clayton. Pleasure to be here. Pleasure to be here indeed. I'm not actually 100% sure that the goals need to change, but maybe it's how you approach them that changes. There probably will be some goal changes as well. I've had a goal of losing weight for a very long time, but it wasn't until COVID, when I wasn't going to all these events and dinners, that I could actually do something about it and only eat the food that I ordered online that was delivered to my house. So, and that's been very successful for me. So I just think often it's a matter of how you change, how you attack, or how you approach those goals rather than changing the goals. You might think, for example, during COVID times, that building social skills is quite difficult during COVID because you can't actually hang out with groups of people. But for my son, who is a little older, but for my son, it was about teaching him how to use text better and how to communicate with his friends using FaceTime and text. And that has actually built his vocabulary and his speech as well. So I think there's lots of different ways of meeting goals. And, you know, the panelists have already talked about how creative, you know, Mogi has already talked about all the creative ways that she's approached these things. And I think parents have got that stuff within them. You know, my son has learnt how to set up gym equipment because we bought a whole lot of secondhand gym equipment, and he now knows how to use that. Whereas before he was always fully supported in the gym to do that work. There've been so many things in our lives that have actually, skills that I probably had dangerous assumptions about that I didn't think that my kids would be able to achieve, have achieved them through COVID. So we didn't have any support workers coming into the home during COVID, which meant that all of the morning routines and the cleaning up and everything else was being left to me, and I just folded and kind of gave up. And my sons actually came to the party, and they actually load the dishwasher, and they've now learned how to put the dishwasher on, and all of those other little bits that I just wasn't expecting from them before, because it was easier to just palm it off to a worker. So I think there's been some real growth, and the goals haven't changed. They're still about independence and communication and social skills.
I'm just wondering, what about determining whether to approach something through our eternal friend now, Zoom, or whether how we cope with the change of, if the face-to-face option then becomes available, is it worth moving back to it, or are we achieving things perhaps that we may not have achieved before?
I'm just going to say that that's got to be a mix of things. So, but in South Australia, we're at a little bubble here. We feel like we're a bit COVID free. So we're acting as normal pretty much. And so we've got some support workers coming back, but of course we haven't got the morning workers coming back now, because my boys have actually, you know, raised their game, and we don't want them now. But there are other things that we're continuing to do online. There are many things that are a lot easier without organising travel. And there's a lot of stuff that we're moving back to face with. So I think it's just a matter of every family will have different needs, different challenges, different ways to meet their goals, and everyone will figure that out for themselves. Don't let anyone else tell you how you need to do that. That is the family's position.
And I imagine also, you know, we're human. There's trial and error.
Oh, absolutely. You know, we mess up every day, but we learn from each of them. Sometimes we repeat them, but generally we try not to repeat our mistakes.
Oh, well, my son lets me know when I repeat mine. So
of course.
He's good like that.
My youngest son is learning to drive at the moment. So I'm getting told every time I go anywhere how many times I have failed the test.
Karen, Is there anything that you'd like to add to?
I really agree with what Sam was saying in terms of a lot of the goals staying the same. It's just how you reach them might have changed. But the other goal that I guess I've seen be added is for people to be able to access online therapy. And so in the beginning there was, and still actually as we're learning more and more about what actually works during online services. So there's things like, do the family have a device that is portable? Because a lot of families are saying, you know, a computer sits there, but they need a device that's portable so that you can go to the backyard if the internet's just that far, or you can go to the kitchen and do like pouring a drink or making breakfast, or be there at a mealtime if that's what you're working on. So the portability of a device is important. I think as an OT, I'm always looking at a child's hands, and as well as their whole body, of course. But so a lot of families, we've been looking at, well, the goal in terms of accessing a device, but can they actually angle the device in a way that I can see what they're doing? And can the angle stay there, or does it constantly fall over? You know, we're all propping up our devices. And so now we're getting smarter about, there's so many mounting devices that are pretty low cost, you know, under $100. That if people have access to NDIS funding, we can request these kinds of things so that we can make online services quality, you know, that the device is suitable, that we can see the area that we want to be able to see. I know I'm looking at, you know, using a stylus with kids. We use the online whiteboard in Zoom a lot, so that we do a drawing together, or we do a work together, or we practice things online together. But rather than using a finger, you know, are they getting that chance to actually use a pencil or something like that, a tool that they are practicing those specific skills. So I think that's probably a new goal that has been added.
The next question that I had that was requested to be asked, and it may change slightly because of the answer to the previous, but the question being asked was, how can we make sure that any new goals that are set will be funded by the NDIS, or perhaps how do we maintain, or how do we continue to have our goals funded by the NDIS during this particular period? Is there a difference? If I could, that sounds quite difficult. So Karen, would you be able to add some clarity to that?
Is this where I say which Karen?
Yes, it is. It is. Yeah, it's Karen Dimmock. Karen D.
Thanks, Clayton.
Thanks,
Look, I'm
Karen.
happy to have a go at that. The NDIS does offer us extraordinary flexibility, and I think there is both getting the plan that you think is going to meet your child's goals, but it's also about how you put together the services and the supports that are going to help your child meet their goals. So we do know that the capacity of families to speak up for their children, to talk about their goals, to talk about their situation as a family as a whole, and to use things like a participant statement or a carer statement as part of the NDIS plan review meeting, all help to being able to share that picture of your child and what their goals are and what they're wanting to achieve. I think sometimes a common experience for all families is that, oh, I wish I'd known about that. And I think we all have that experience with the NDIS of just getting to a point and thinking, I didn't know that I could ask for that. I didn't know that I could speak up in that way. I didn't know these things were possible with the plan. And that is where events like today and connecting with other families are so important, because you're going to get such great input and advice from those who are on the journey. And just, Moggy, what you've shared in terms of what you're doing with your child's plan, and I know that the great work that Sam does with the growing space, just that generosity of spirit and sharing what's possible, I think that's where we learn as families what is possible and how to speak up for our children and their goals.
And Sam, I wondered if I could throw to you on this question as well.
I just want to amplify what Karen was saying around peer support. There is nothing like the support and advice and suggestions and ideas that you'll get from other parents and might I say from adults with disability as well. So make sure there's some adults with disability in your networks. Get online, join some Facebook groups, ignore the awful stuff and just take away the good stuff, because there's plenty of great stuff on there, and it's very, very not threatening when you're on a social media platform like that, because you can dip in and out as it suits you when you've got the strength to do it. So I think that's really valuable. As far as making sure that new goals get funded, NDIS doesn't actually fund goals, so that's not part of the legislation. But you can't spend your money on anything that is not in your goals. So I think it's a really important tip for everybody to know that you can change your goals at any time during the plan cycle, and the goals must be accepted by the agency, and theoretically you should be offered given a new plan within 7 days with the new goals. Now they don't do that, but if you just email them with your new goals, you can consider them technically accepted as your new goals in your plan. So you can do that at any time in the plan cycle. It's not a plan review, it's nothing. You just send them your new goals. So I think that's really important. I can talk more if you want, but I'm aware of time, just checking.
I suspect I'm not the only one that wasn't aware of that, but my wife may tell me otherwise, but that's really insightful. I just wondered, again, if I open that up to the panel, if anyone had anything else they would like to contribute on that side.
You know, I can add a tiny bit more that I'd really like to add. If people are looking at ways to attract funding as opposed to goals, what their goals are, you really want to talk about what that funding has achieved for you in the past year. You want to say what you're hoping that the new funding will achieve. There's 4 things here. So what has it achieved? What will it achieve? Why other things won't work? And why the cost is appropriate. And then what might happen if it's not funded? So if you cover those 4 things, preferably in writing, sorry, but if you cover those 4 things at your review meeting, it's going to be very hard for the agency to deny that.
This next question I'd love to open up to everybody. I think we've touched on it already to some degree, but I'd love to open it up. Is there a silver lining to the pandemic for families? And I've heard mostly silver linings at the moment. I was expecting a lot of pandemic gloom, but in fact, families with children in early intervention are incredibly resourceful and resilient. So would love to be able to share at this point with other families the silver linings that have been encountered and possible silver linings that await. I might start that with yourself, Karen. Dee. See, I'll get the hang of this by the time.
We Karens are used to this. Look, I am joining you from the western suburbs of Melbourne, which clearly has had a very different COVID experience to the rest of the country. And it is tempting to be a little black cloud, to be honest. But I've talked to so many families over the last few months, and I think these would be the silver linings for me, and particularly from that advocacy perspective. One, just how families have spoken up, supported one another, shared information with one another. I think there's just been incredible networks of support, all largely online, to really help each other through this experience. But that speaking up has made a difference. And one thing here in Victoria we're famous for is our Premier doing a daily press conference. Every time he has mentioned schools and what's going to happen in relation to schools, he specifically talks about students with disability. And students with disability have been prioritised in the return to school that has sort of happened, and then we've all gone back into lockdown a few times. So, but that has been the work of many parents and many advocates. the NDIS as well, it might not be general knowledge, but there is a specific booklet for parents of school-age participants in Victoria. And for me, this really showed the capacity of the agency to respond to our specific situation. And I think, to be frank, government departments are not always able to respond so quickly. And so it's been great to have that information and a real outreach approach by the agency to connect with families and to make it as flexible as possible about what families can do. And the last couple of silver linings is that under the restrictions, and the restrictions are incredibly tight, here in Melbourne in particular, but across Victoria, is that family support is permitted under the restrictions. So if you have a child with a disability, a relative can come into your home to assist, or your child can go to the relatives for care. And I think that also just acknowledges the importance of our networks and how we support one another, and that even through a pandemic, those will always be some of the most important supports. Our very final one is that playgrounds open tomorrow in Victoria, and we are incredibly excited about that. And that is the first restriction that is ending. And I think that also just talks to the needs of children and families to be together and socialising. So they're my silver linings. Thanks, Clayton.
Thank you. And Emma, I'd love to get your silver linings.
So I think there's been quite a lot of silver linings, and ironically, I think one of the silver linings has been togetherness. So for families that are in a bubble together, they've really been able to get to know each other and get to know each other's strengths and support needs. So quite often, a child will spend more time with one family member than another. And what I've seen, particularly in Melbourne, is where families have all have to be in the home together for quite a sustained period of time. But they're discovering the joys about each other too. They're discovering that sense of humour that their child has goes a long way to mitigating some of the difficulties. And it's also given families pointers as to where they need to upskill. And in my day job, I work with Positive Partnerships, and they put a lot of things online that are all free, webinars and online learning. And we've had such a huge uptake from families as well as professionals, but really families seeking to upskill together so everyone's on the same page, using the same language, and discovering a different way of being as a family. So putting aside some of that rat race stuff and just discovering a new way of being as a family. And I think that's really been a silver lining for so many families, particularly where kids are autistic and school might have been more stressful than for some other kids.
Sam, would you like to add your silver linings?
I've lost 20 kilos. That's my silver lining. No, I've learned that my son with a significant intellectual disability is actually able to play bananagrams and Scrabble, which I never would have expected. It's just incredible. So I think playing the board games and being together, as Emma has suggested, watching my boys become a lot more independent, not having to go places all the time, to be able to just wear my tracksuits at home. And I've got a nice jumper on here, but you've got no idea about the Ugg boots down below. So I've definitely enjoyed that.
Karen, F, your silver linings.
I can think of a couple. I think as a professional, there's been a great equalizer that families now see into my home and I go into their home. I went into their home. So I haven't really unpacked that, but that's been quite powerful. And on the odd occasion, something happens in my environment and I'm human, just like, there's something really leveling about that. I think also as a professional, I've really been challenged to go back to basics about household items. What does everybody have at home? everyday routines, like really like refocusing on that. Whereas even though that's always been important in our work, I think you can veer off that quite easily and just get so like having to come back to that. I think something that Tim said about like, I can't just reach out and touch that child or do something. I have to really access all the training I've had in coaching and helping to deliver sustainable changes. So that's a continual challenge. So I think professionally it's been, you know, they're the silver linings.
And Moggy, did you want to add just a couple more on top before we?
Yeah, the silver linings for our family. It's life slowed down a lot. You know, life with young children, and especially with one with disability, is hectic and busy, like all normal things, and plus appointments, therapies, and all other things. But then the most beautiful thing we had experienced is life slowed down so much, and I just enjoyed my children as a mom, and then this relationship between just the like mother and children, that relationship was transferred into like beautiful strong bond, although we always had it, but then this time really made it very, very strong. And that was the most beautiful silver lining for our family from this pandemic.
I can find no nicer way to end at that point. What I'd like to do now is, if Stacey has any questions that have been sent through, we can take those questions from the floor, or if people would like to send through a question, just see what we have for you.
There were some questions.
Here we are.
Going back through the chat, it's been very active. There were definitely some questions, particularly Sam, wanting to just know a little bit more about what you were mentioning before. I think at one point you said, I can share a little bit more about that. And there were a few people saying, yes, please. They'd never heard, they had no idea about what you're speaking about, myself included. So if you're able to share a little bit more about that.
Which part are you referring to, Stacey?
It was around making changes and about that, around the goals.
The goals, yeah. It's in the NDIS legislation. It's very clear that anybody can change their goals at any time, and that the NDIS is actually supposed to issue you with a plan with those goals within 7 days. So, you know, it kind of blew my mind when I discovered that as well. So now what I do is I just advise, if you want to change your goals to fit sort of what you want to use your funding for example, just send an email to inquiries@ndis.gov.au with your new goals and let them know that the other part of that legislation is that the NDIS must accept those goals. So they are obligated to accept those goals. They don't have to fund them, but they do have to accept what goals you give them. So is that enough info there, Stacey? I'm not quite sure. It's not a change of circumstances. I've seen that in there. It is not, it's probably not even a new, you probably won't even actually get a new plan. The agency don't seem to have sort of acknowledged this part of the legislation yet, but it is very much in there, I can absolutely assure you.
I have a couple of questions that have come through. I'll go to one which is to you, Emma. So, Dr. Goodall, what additional things should parents of children who are autistic consider in this pandemic period? So
I think one of the main things that needs to be considered is a return to school, whether that's this year or next year. In South Australia, our kids weren't out very long, but even a short period, as people know, if you've got kids on the spectrum, when they just going back after the school holidays, sometimes that can be anxiety provoking. Now, some kids have spent a long time out of school. Some of our autistic young people have thrived learning at home, but others actually like being in school, but still the anxiety about going back is going to be difficult. And I think another thing that needs to be considered is how can we work on some life skills at home? So things like getting to know ourselves and understand ourselves, and learning to know what makes us happy, what is a difficult thing for us. And as children, that's not actually what we learn in school. That is something we learn at home. So the pandemic's been a really good time to start learning those kinds of things.
Another question, which we do have time for. What are some creative ways you've worked with children who refuse to go online? Karen, F.
Yeah, I think that has happened a bit. I think we kind of referred to in the beginning different ways of providing services, so the parent-only sessions. We've had some families where families just didn't want to use Zoom. They didn't want to use this video technology in their house at all. And so we've just looked at, well, how else can we do it? So families might have taken videos of their child when they were doing something, just a little 30-second or a 1-minute video, and then sent that to the team, and then we have a look at that and send some ideas back, and there's a bit of backward and forward discussion that happens. I'm thinking of another family where the child didn't want to come to the screen, so mum and I just decided to chat via Zoom, and then every now and then the child would pop their head in and go, hi, and then go back out again. And so I think over a period of maybe 5 or 6 sessions, the child was watching their parent talking to me. And then I'd have, we'd have a little activity ready to go. When they came on screen, when they were interested, we'd interact with them, do something fun, and then it might be 2 to 3 minutes, and then they would pop off again. And that time just started to increase and increase. So just to not expect, I guess, that we go straight from like a 1 hour face-to-face to a 1 hour online. Online can look so different. The laptop might be sitting in the corner and mum and a child are playing, and I might just be watching from a distance and say something every now and then. But really, I'm just an observer. That can provide some input, or just to start really slowly, like a few minutes, and then build it up as if there's a desire for it, or yeah, they're just some ideas. Oh, and one other one, have we got time?
Yes, please do.
It's like playing hide and seek. Kids in the beginning were so fascinated by this. Like, if they hadn't had much experience with this video technology or video calls and things, they'd be like putting their hand up, and like their face would go right up to the camera, and they'd pop off and then come back again. And so we played a lot of games of, oh, I can't see you, where could you be? That hide and seek kind of game. And then I'd pop off, and then they'd think that was hilarious. Where's Karen gone? And then I would just put a hand out or a foot, and they, just playing with it, playing with this little box that we all find ourselves in. How can we play with that?
And another question I think I have time for one more. How have you seen people use their funding flexibly? Now, I'm not quite sure what that means.
I think they're talking about moving funding between buckets, but we've answered that. We've answered that in the chat. But I'll give you all one fabulous example of something one of our families came up with. Their young person was doing a lot of hydrotherapy. It was the only thing that reduced pain and increased mobility. And as soon as COVID hit and the swimming pools shut, her mobility reduced significantly and her pain increased. It was terrible. Her mother, brilliant woman, called up one of those party spa hire companies and had a spa delivered on a trailer in their backyard and rented it through COVID. And so she continued all of that hydrotherapy in a spa tub that was on a trailer in their backyard for the next month or 2. It was pretty fabulous. And they used their NDIS funds to pay for that. So just one example. There's a million examples. There's people are clever.
Look, we've been very wonderful on our time, and everyone's been very succinct. And thank you very much for guiding me through this process. You're rather a daunting bunch, and I've really enjoyed the process, and I hope it's been a benefit to everybody. I have no doubt that it has been hugely beneficial to people. I'm going to wrap things up. I would just like to probably just comment on what I've noticed during this period of COVID and I think it's been touched on earlier, but it's just people's ability to communicate, to connect, and to share. And I felt that was what was most at risk, and that was what I feared. I feel with us as a family and our connection, and having Harry as part of the community. But all in all, that's what's been so impressive to me, is that people, in some ways, there's been connections that have increased. There are challenges with family, wanting to see family and grandparents. This has been a real strain. But in general, at first I felt that everyone said they were in the same boat. And I thought, well, yes, but it's not the same boat. They're in the same storm, but we've all got different size boats. But as it's evolved, it's really been great to see how people connect and assist and communicate. To me, that's been the greatest silver lining that I've seen, is that social connection and seeing the good in people. It's quite nice to do that. I haven't seen it since the Olympics, when we all changed who we were, but it's been quite a privilege to watch. So thank you very much to you all. I would like to, on behalf of everybody, thank you, Karen Dimmick, Karen Furman, Sampaio, Mogi Bayaskalan, and Dr. Emma Goodall. Thank you very much from us to you.